The camera opens on Jessica, a 32-year-old teacher sitting at her kitchen table. It's late evening, and the only sound in the room is the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of a wall clock. Papers are spread out before her. Student loan statements, credit card bills, and a paycheck stub that seems almost too small for the work she puts in every day. Jessica presses her hands against her temples. Her eyes well up with tears, not because she doesn't want to pay her debt, but because she has been paying it faithfully for almost a decade, and yet the number barely seems to shrink. Her voice cracks as she whispers into the silence. I've given everything I can, but will I ever be free of this? It's a question millions of Americans are asking themselves right now. And in 2025, something monumental has shifted in the student loan system that could change Jessica's life, and maybe yours too. What if I told you that depending on your income, your payment history, and a few critical details, you might be closer to forgiveness than you've ever imagined? That's exactly what we're diving into today. In this video, we're going to break down everything you need to know about student loan forgiveness in 2025. What's real, what's rumor, and what steps you can take right now to avoid missing out. But before we get into the details, let me ask you this. Would you trade the next 20 minutes of your time to potentially save yourself years, maybe even decades, of payments? If the answer is yes, then keep watching, because Jessica's story might just become your story. And as we go through this, don't forget, hit that like button so YouTube knows this information matters. Subscribe so you don't miss critical updates, and share this video with someone you know who's buried in debt. You never know, it could be the lifeline they've been waiting for. Now, let's start at the beginning of Jessica's journey, the moment she first realized just how heavy the weight of student debt would be. Jessica sat at her desk the next morning, staring at the stack of essays her students had turned in. She loved her job, loved watching her kids grow and learn, but the truth was, it didn't pay nearly enough to cover the debt she carried on her back. Every month, a huge chunk of her paycheck vanished in loan payments. And no matter how faithfully she paid, the balance seemed frozen in time. Some months, with interest stacked on top, the total owed even crept higher. She remembers the day she calculated the numbers for the first time. After nearly 9 years of steady payments, she had only shaved a few thousand off her original balance. The rest? Consumed by interest. It wasn't just Jessica. Across the country, millions of borrowers were facing the same crushing reality. Teachers, nurses, social workers, people dedicating their lives to helping others, were stuck in a cycle that felt impossible to escape. And then came the promises. Over the years, Jessica had heard about forgiveness programs, income-driven repayment, public service loan forgiveness, temporary waivers. But every time she thought she qualified, there was a catch. Paperwork lost, payments that didn't count, rules that changed overnight. It felt like running a marathon, only to be told at mile 25 that the finish line had been moved farther down the road. But something changed in 2025. For the first time, real reforms began reshaping the student loan landscape. Income thresholds were adjusted, more payments began to qualify under the new SAVE plan, and old denials were being re-examined. Borrowers who had spent decades in repayment, people just like Jessica, were finally being told, "You're free." Yet for many, the rules still felt confusing. What counted? Who qualified? And how could you be sure you weren't missing your chance? Jessica's story wasn't just about one woman's struggle anymore. It was the mirror reflecting a nationwide crisis and the beginning of a potential breakthrough. Because in 2025, for the first time, hope wasn't just a headline. It was an opportunity, and Jessica was determined not to let it slip through her fingers. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Jessica's phone buzzed with a notification. She almost ignored it. Another email from her loan servicer. She thought, probably a reminder that her payment was due. But something about the subject line made her pause. Important. New 2025 forgiveness changes may affect you. Her heart skipped. She clicked. The email explained that the Department of Education had finalized updates for 2025, changes that could finally make forgiveness real. For borrowers like Jessica, who have been teaching for nearly a decade, payments under older plans that were once dismissed as non-qualifying would now count toward forgiveness. She read it twice, barely believing the words. For the first time, her years of sacrifice, the late nights grading papers, the summers spent working extra tutoring jobs, might finally matter. But the email didn't stop there. It laid out the highlights of the new rules. Borrowers enrolled in the SAVE plan could see balances forgiven sooner if they had been in repayment for 20 to 25 years. Public service loan forgiveness was being streamlined, making it easier for teachers, nurses, and government workers to qualify. Borrowers who had made 120 monthly payments, even under mixed plans, could now be eligible. And most shocking of all, many who had been paying for decades were being reevaluated automatically. Jessica's hands trembled as she scrolled. Could this be it? Could the finish line, the one that had always felt like a mirage, finally be within reach? That night, she sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, digging deeper. News outlets were buzzing about the reforms. Videos were circulating of borrowers logging into their accounts, only to see their balances drop to zero overnight. Some cried, some screamed, some just sat in stunned silence. Jessica whispered to herself, "Could that be me?" It was the first time in years that she allowed herself to imagine life without debt. And in that moment, her story shifted. The years of exhaustion and frustration gave way to something new, possibility. For Jessica, this wasn't just policy. This was hope. Jessica didn't sleep much after that night. For the first time in years, her debt didn't feel like a locked cage. It felt like a door she might finally be able to open. But there was one thing she knew for certain. Forgiveness wasn't automatic for everyone. She had to fight for it. The very next morning, she sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Papers scattered across the surface. Old payment receipts, loan statements, employment verification letters. It looked like a storm of documents. "This is it," she whispered, steadying herself. "I've worked too hard for this to slip away." Her first step was the employment certification form. As a teacher, Jessica qualified under Public Service Loan Forgiveness, PSLF, but she needed proof of her years of service. That meant going back through almost a decade of employment records. She emailed principals from schools she hadn't worked at in years. Some didn't respond. Some sent her on a paper trail of HR departments that felt like mazes. Then came the calls. Hours on hold with her loan servicer, listening to that same tinny hold music over and over again. Sometimes she waited nearly an hour, only to be disconnected right when a human voice answered. Other times, she was told different answers by different representatives. One evening, after a particularly long day, she slammed her phone down in frustration. Tears welled in her eyes. It felt impossible. The system wasn't designed to be easy. It was designed to wear people down. But Jessica had learned how to endure storms before. This was no different. She made a plan. Every morning before school, she would make one phone call. Every afternoon, she would scan and upload one set of documents. Every weekend, she would track down one missing signature or verification. Piece by piece, she built her case. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the puzzle began to take shape. One day, she logged into her loan account and noticed something startling. Her qualifying payment count had jumped. Those years she thought didn't count, the ones under old repayment plans, were suddenly credited. Jessica gasped. For the first time, her balance began to feel vulnerable, like it was no longer an immovable mountain, but something that could actually collapse. The climb wasn't over, but she was closer to the summit than she had ever been. Still, one nagging thought haunted her. Would the system really deliver? Or would some hidden loophole rip this chance away at the very last moment? The day Jessica received the confirmation email that her application for student loan forgiveness was under review, she allowed herself a rare smile. For weeks, she had been buried in paperwork, hunting down old pay stubs, revisiting employment records from years past, and calculating her payments with painstaking precision. She felt like a runner who had finally caught sight of the finish line after miles of grueling terrain. But just as she began to breathe easier, the first roadblock appeared. One late evening, sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, Jessica opened her inbox to find a message from the Department of Education. Her eyes darted over the subject line, Additional documentation required. Her stomach sank. She clicked it open. The letter stated that some of her records didn't align. Her income-driven repayment history wasn't showing complete data for 2 years when she had been working part-time and struggling to make payments. It wasn't that she hadn't paid. She remembered each painful payment. But somewhere in the maze of servicer transfers and system errors, her records had gaps. Jessica pressed her palms to her forehead, whispering, "Not now, not after everything." The next morning, she called her loan servicer. A cheerful yet detached voice answered, "Ma'am, it looks like we're missing proof of payments for 2018 and 2019. Without those, your forgiveness timeline can't be verified." Her voice cracked, "But I made those payments. I remember. I have bank statements. I have records." The representative replied coolly, "You'll need to submit them manually. Otherwise, your application will be delayed or denied." For the first time, Jessica felt the weight of the system pressing down with full force. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the years of her life on trial. She scoured old folders, digging through shoeboxes filled with bank statements and unopened envelopes. She called her old employer, pleading for copies of wage slips. Every step forward seemed to reveal another roadblock: an outdated form, a missing signature, a servicer insisting they never received her submission. At night, the anxiety grew louder. What if all this was for nothing? What if she slipped through the cracks like so many others who had given up on the process? Jessica's story was beginning to mirror that of millions of borrowers across the country. People promised relief, yet trapped in endless loops of bureaucracy. It wasn't just her fight anymore. It was the story of a generation crushed not by laziness or poor choices, but by a system designed with walls too high to climb easily. Still, despite the setbacks, Jessica's spirit did not break. Each time she stumbled, she whispered to herself, "This is my life on the line. I can't walk away now." And with that, she gathered her scattered documents, pieced together the fragments of her financial history, and braced herself for the next battle. Jessica sat by the window of her apartment, rain streaking down the glass, the envelope from the Department of Education clutched in her hands. She had been waiting weeks, checking her email every morning, her mailbox every afternoon, for an update. Her pulse raced as she tore it open. The letter was not what she expected. Her application had been flagged. Additional verification required. It read in bold black letters. The phrasing was cold, bureaucratic, void of any recognition of the years she had carried this debt or the hope she had pinned on forgiveness. Her stomach sank, but she didn't crumble. Instead, she exhaled slowly and spread the pages out across her kitchen table. "They're not going to make this easy," she whispered, "but I'm not giving up now." The setback wasn't a denial. It was a demand for more proof. They needed pay stubs from jobs she'd worked 5 years ago. They wanted updated record from her loan servicer, documents she had thought were long buried in old email archives. And the biggest hurdle? A discrepancy between her original repayment plan and the new income-driven repayment program she had switched into last year. The system was tangled, messy, and confusing by design. Jessica spent hours on the phone with her servicer, her notebook filling with scribbles of reference numbers, call times, and names of representatives. Each time she thought she had provided everything, another form was requested. Each time she hung up, she sat staring at the clock, minutes and hours of her life traded away in the name of paperwork. But this time, unlike years past, Jessica didn't let the frustration consume her. She remembered her promise to herself the day she learned about the 2025 forgiveness updates. She would fight this through, no matter how many obstacles appeared. She created a binder. Every document she could dig up, old W-2s, pay stubs, loan statements, was filed and labeled. She asked her mother to search through boxes in her attic for paperwork Jessica thought was lost. She even called former employers, embarrassed but resolute, asking if HR could reprint employment verification from jobs she had left nearly a decade ago. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to close the gaps. The tension built not because Jessica was losing, but because she was so close, yet still tethered to the chains of bureaucracy. Every request, Every delay, every reminder that the system wasn't designed to move quickly, felt like a test. Late one night, as she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, her eyes heavy from exhaustion, she said aloud to herself, "They won't see if I'll quit. I won't." Jessica's progress slowed, her patience tested, but her resolve burning brighter than ever. The storm hadn't broken her. It was preparing her for the breakthrough that was about to come. Jessica sat in the same cramped kitchen where her story had begun, only this time the air felt different. The stack of bills that once threatened to bury her was gone, replaced with a slim white envelope resting on the table. Her fingers trembled as she slid it open, reading the words she had fought for months, years, even, to see. Congratulations. Your student loans have been forgiven under the 2025 Federal Forgiveness Program. Her knees buckled, and she sank into the nearest chair. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not the tears of despair that once haunted her nights, but tears of release. For the first time since her graduation, she could breathe without the invisible chain pulling at her chest. She looked out the small window as the afternoon light spilled across the kitchen. The world outside hadn't changed. The traffic still buzzed, neighbors still hurried about their lives. But for Jessica, everything was new. She thought about all the nights she had worked double shifts at the diner, the morning she had walked into her office job with exhaustion weighing her down, and the countless times she had whispered to herself, "Just hold on." Jessica had held on, and she had won. But in that moment, she also realized her victory wasn't just hers. The fight she endured was the same battle thousands of others were still facing in 2025. People just like her, single parents, first-generation college graduates, teachers, nurses, and young professionals, were waiting for their own envelope, their own freedom. She knew what this meant. Forgiveness wasn't a miracle handed down by chance. It was the result of persistence, knowledge, and courage to keep going when the system tried to wear her down. Jessica picked up her phone, recording a short video for her small online support group of other borrowers. Her voice cracked at first, but then grew stronger. "I just got the letter. It's real. The loans are gone. And I need you to hear me when I say this. Don't give up. I almost did. I almost believed I wasn't worthy of this chance. But these new 2025 forgiveness reforms, they're here for us. You just have to fight through the paperwork, the wait times, and the doubt. If I can get through this, so can you." As she pressed send, she leaned back, a soft smile stretching across her face. For the first time in a decade, the future wasn't defined by debt. It was open, wide, and hers to claim. The camera lingers on Jessica as she walks to her window, pulling it open and letting the warm air rush in. Her voice, steady and certain, carries into the final message for every viewer watching. This isn't just my story. It could be yours too. If you're sitting under the weight of loans, know this. Change is happening right now. Learn what's possible, take that first step, and don't stop until you see it through. Your freedom is closer than you think. Have you been impacted by the 2025 student loan forgiveness changes? Share your story in the comments below. And if Jessica's journey inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because someone out there needs to know that hope is real.